Revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, this week I'm pleased to have Sarah Teets from the band Mind Maze on as my guest today. Welcome.
Hi, good to be here.
So, you would say, how would you basically describe your band and what genre you guys are?
Well, it's kind of hard sometimes because I feel like our now almost 11 years as a band, which that seems crazy to me, but in our like 11 years, we've kind of gone back and forth between a bunch of different genres, but I mean, generally I kind of sum us up as like a progressive power metal band. So, that's what I'd say overall.
And for those that don't know what progressive power metal is, if you go into the metal genre, there are so many different branches of that believe me, I'm still learning about it myself as a lot of my teachers are in the metal genre, so I'm starting to learn that there are many different branches of that. So if you don't know what it is, go on the internet because you'll figure it out and there's a lot of different options out there. All right, so I have a whole list of questions here. What is the type of music that you like to listen to when you're not with your band?
Well, it kind of varies a lot, but I honestly am all over the map with the kinds of music that I listen to, outside of the band. I mean, I would probably say that my overall like favorite style of music is like melodic hard rock. I like a lot of 80s bands, stuff like Winger and Tesla and Whitesnake, stuff like that. Some more like newer bands like Eclipse is a really great like melodic hard rock band from Sweden, that I always recommend. But I also listen to all kinds of other things like indie pop and country music. I actually grew up on country. So I don't listen to like modern country music like what's on the radio usually now, but like 90s country I'm all for. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place.
Funny that you mentioned Whitesnake. One of my teachers, private guitar teachers, is actually Joe Hoekstra. He plays for Whitesnake. And for my guest, he will be on here in just a few weeks. So I will be excited to have him on in a few weeks to talk
Oh,
about
awesome.
the upcoming album. All right. So, what's it like being in an industry as a female that used to be known as a boys' club for so many years?
Well, it's still challenging at times, I think. There's definitely been like we've made a lot of progress as far as there just being so many more bands nowadays that have women in them. There are so many more like successful bands that have women in them, that are like huge. Like some of the biggest names like in the industry are like female fronted bands or just bands that are made up of all women or they're like female guitarists. Like Nita Strauss is like doing so well right now and she's a huge name. So I mean, I think we've made a lot of progress, like just more women in the industry. But I mean, it's still been challenging at times. There are still some people that are kind of mentally stuck in old ways, so to speak. And
We've all
I've
that.
gone to many a show and had the people like working at the venue assume that I was like the merch girl or somebody's girlfriend or something. So it's sad that that stuff still happens like now, but it definitely still does. Like it's happened to me like within the last few years, which is just kind of crazy because I'm kind of like, don't you even like Google like the bands that are playing at your venue and like at least know that I'm in the band because you looked them up? Like that's kind of crazy, but I mean, it has gotten a lot better though. There's definitely, I think now there's a lot more, like I said, strength in numbers. Women in bands can kind of unite and sort of have a unified force against like sexism and stuff like that. So, yeah,
You would figure that nowadays venues would actually do, and the people in those venues would do their research before coming into work.
you would think, but it doesn't always happen.
All right. What was the inspiration behind the song "Sign of Life"? Because I thought the name was interesting.
Well, Sign of Life is like the single off of the album Resolve, and the album is a concept album. So it kind of goes along with the concept of the album. Sign of Life is like the turning point in the album. The album kind of goes through like what someone's mental process is when they're trying to get over like a loss or like it's the end of a relationship, like not necessarily like a romantic one. It could be like a friendship. Like honestly, a lot of it was inspired by um our original drummer leaving the band and the fact that we had been friends for so long and all that happened. It kind of like emotionally affected us. So um that album just kind of goes through what you're thinking mentally as you go through all the emotions of dealing with that loss and the anger and regret. And then like the sign of life comes about like halfway through the album. And that's like the turning point where like the person, the protagonist of the album, which is kind of just, it's written in like first person, so it's kind of like me talking about what I'm thinking about going through all this. And that song's kind of just like the turning point where you realize, hey, maybe this isn't the end of the world. Maybe all isn't lost. Maybe there's hope and like a sign of life to kind of move forward and get past it and be better for it.
That's awesome. And I think nowadays we see so many band lineup shakeups where we see people leaving, new people coming in, and we constantly see so much change within the industry, especially since COVID hit. Things have gotten a lot more confusing for bands in terms of touring, recording, expenses, stuff like that. We've seen so much change through the course of the pandemic. So I think that having music that really talks about, okay, what are the emotions that one might feel when going through something like that? I think that's really good for people to have. Music truly is such an emotional piece.
Yeah, and I mean for us, we've kind of always like, as far as my lyrics go, I usually always write about personal experiences and things that I've either gone through or how I'm feeling or stuff I've experienced myself. I mean, we have some songs that are based off of books or movies or things like that, but for the most part, like I tend to gravitate more towards first person, like emotional feelings.
That's awesome. All right. Actually, I had one person in my family, uh, she wanted me to ask a question as she was wondering, how do females, especially yourself, how do you keep your voice so healthy when you're on the road recording, especially in metal music where the vocals can be so incredibly strong? How do you keep your voice in check so that you don't blow it out?
I mean, it's crazy. It's funny getting asked that question now because I think last year for me in particular was a really challenging year vocally. I mean, we didn't do a whole lot. But we did have some big shows. Like we've been playing at Music Fest the last couple of years, which is like a huge music festival in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. And we did that, but we also played at Prague Power USA, which has kind of been like a huge dream of ours since we like formed as a band to get to perform there. And it these performances were kind of in the midst of like me dealing with some crazy health things. Like after Prague Power, the whole band ended up getting COVID. And it totally threw everything off for me for the rest of the year. Like I spent like almost the rest of the year dealing with some kind of remnants from that, whether it was like just post like throat infections or just other things like. And the music fest show was extremely difficult for me because I was trying to do it while getting over like having a major like throat infection. So last year was a little bit rough for me, but in general, I try to just I mean they always say like stay hydrated and it does help. Like when I'm singing, I make sure I'm like always drinking water. That usually helps. Like things like humidifiers during the winter make a huge difference because it's so dry like inside, especially in this area this time of year, it can get really dry inside. So like humidifiers have helped me a lot. I have like a portable nebulizer that kind of helps me keep moisture like in my vocal cords. You'll see a lot of singers with things like that. But I mean, other than those kind of like little tricks, I sort of just try to make sure that I get enough sleep and I'm like well rested and my body's kind of like prepared to go out and do these things. Um, I do like some vocal exercises, obviously, to warm up before the gigs, because that's like super important. Like, you never want to go like full bore, like at the beginning of a set without having warmed up at all. And nothing like crazy. Like I don't warm up for hours or anything before we do shows, but just some little stuff, some exercises to kind of get my voice ready to sing. And with metal, I think a big thing is just kind of making sure you learn how to support your voice properly, like do proper breathing techniques and use your diaphragm to like support your voice, because otherwise it's just kind of going to destroy your vocal cords like from your throat and be really really hard on your voice. So yeah.
So recently on Instagram, I actually saw that you ran into someone that I actually happen to know from the industry, Chris Caffrey from Trans-Siberian Orchestra. He's also with Jimmy Sturr's Orchestra and so many other different bands. I think one is the Amish Boys. I'm not familiar exactly with their title, but I've heard that the music is definitely interesting. How did you get to know Chris at first?
Well, it's funny, like Chris and I actually go like way back because my brother Jeff and I, Jeff, the guitarist of Mind Maze, we are like huge Sabotage fans. And so we've been really into Sabotage and like Trans-Siberian Orchestra for forever, like for years. And Chris was doing like over 10 years ago, Chris was doing a bunch of like solo shows for his like solo material. And his album Faces is like a really great album. So I highly recommend checking that out if you haven't heard it yet, or if anybody else hasn't heard it. But he was doing some touring for his solo stuff, and we just kind of met him at some of those shows and got to know him that way. And Jeff ended up actually like doing Edge of Thorns, the Sabotage song, with Chris live, like at Dingbats in New Jersey. And he did like a couple other songs. Like he did this acoustic show like at the Queen's Library in New York, and he let Jeff play keyboards with him for that. So we kind of just met him as fans, and he was like a really cool guy. And Chris really like loves all the Sabotage stuff, and I know he really like loved being in Sabotage. So anybody who wants to talk about that, he's usually super interested in talking about Sabotage. But yeah, I mean, we were just fans, and he was just really cool, and we kind of just got to know him then. And then yeah, last year Chris was playing with the Amish Outlaws at Music Fest,
Which outlaws?
and Jeff and I happened to be there. So we were like, hey, I saw Chris post like on Instagram that he was going to be doing that. And, I just texted him, and then like, so we met up there, and it was, you know, fingers crossed. I'm not saying for sure, but we did discuss the possibility of maybe him playing with us at Music Fest this year, doing a couple songs, some like maybe just some metal covers or something. So, not saying it's a definite, but we talked about it. So hopefully.
Badass. And my apologies to Bearcast Media if I'm not allowed to swear. I don't know. They didn't tell me I wasn't allowed to, so
I always struggle with that too, so I understand.
yeah, Bearcast, they weren't very strict with me. Basically, they gave me one solid rule. They're just like, as long as you talk about the university which we're connected to positively, you shouldn't have a problem. So I was like, okay, anything goes. By the way, Chris, if you ever watch this and you have any openings for guitar students, I will gladly take on a fifth guitar teacher. They always take your opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, learn from whoever you can. That's important.
So, does Mind Maze, are you guys in the process of making any new music or do you have any upcoming shows?
Okay. Well, we've been in the process of making a new album for like forever. It's honestly been the last like 5 years have been really like challenging for us. I mean, in a variety of ways. Like obviously COVID affected the music industry on a huge level, and I mean it affected us because the studio we use, our engineer is actually like immunocompromised, and we couldn't take any risks. Like no one wanted to go in there and possibly take the risk of making our engineer sick or anything like that. So that kind of affected the process. But I mean, honestly, just dealing with the stress of COVID and just how the world got turned upside down, and that there weren't live shows and we couldn't play and everything like that. It's like it did have like a huge mental effect on all of us. So the last couple years have kind of just been challenging from a mental health perspective for us to kind of get back to normal, so to speak, and be inspired to write or finish music. Like we've had some demos of new music done for years, a couple years now, because our plan originally was we had run a Kickstarter project to do a new EP after we finished our tour that we did in 2018. So, quite a few years ago at this point. And the plan was to put out an EP back then to kind of bridge the gap between, because we knew we weren't going to be ready to do another full length right away. We figured that would like bridge the gap between Resolve and our next full length. Well, we still like didn't make really anything. So we did release the EP's worth of music digitally to the Kickstarter backers last year. Just because we felt like so bad because these people have been waiting forever to get something from us. And I mean, we're doing our best. We can't control some of these things, and we're trying to just focus on making sure we're all like healthy mentally and physically to even make the music. But we did release like a digital EP to the Kickstarter backers to kind of be like, here's the EP that we promised. Um, we swear we're not just taking your money and like running away with it.
Still working.
Um, and in that process, we were able to release like two digital singles for everybody. In 2020, we released Stand Your Ground. And then last year, we released Forever Too Late, which has the most convenient and ironic title. But last year, we released Forever Too Late on the day that we played Prog Power USA. The song actually features, it's a duet between me and Ida Hauptland, who is the vocalist of Triosphere. They're like a great Norwegian progressive power metal band. So I recommend them as well. But we were able to at least put out like two singles to be like, hey, we're still alive. Um, but things are actually, they've gotten considerably better, I think, for all of us personally in the last like 6 months or so. And I think we're ready to like we're making progress on things, and I think that we'll have a new album done and ready to be out. Like it should be out next year. So that's the plan. That's what we're working on, and yeah.
What would be your advice to bands who have really struggled during the pandemic? Because I think in general we've seen so many bands struggling with, even after COVID slowed down, we've seen tour logistics get even more complicated with rules and regulations, and tours having to be canceled because of that, people getting sick. What would be your advice to bands who really have just had like COVID really hit them hard?
I mean, I think like my biggest advice and kind of just what I try to focus on myself, because um we we're obviously like a smaller level band, and we've never really been able to like we've done some tours that were a good amount of length, but generally speaking, like we all have to work like full-time jobs and have stuff going on the side. Like music isn't our full-time job. So I just kind of tried to tell myself like, hey, like remember why you're doing this. And that's like because you love music and you love playing. And I just kind of tried to focus on the fact that I really enjoyed playing. And if that meant that we were just practicing in our like practice space and we weren't actually out there like doing shows in front of people, then I mean, so be it. Like just kind of tried to focus on my actual like love of music and the enjoyment I got out of it. And everything else, I mean, it's definitely frustrating when logistics don't go your way, and anybody else that's a musician knows that that is very often that happens. So, um but yeah, just try to focus on the reason that you started doing this and like the thing you enjoy the most about it. And, the rest will kind of fall into place.
I'm actually interested about Prague Power because quite a few of my private teachers have actually played there. I'm wondering if you've ever ran into them. One of mine is Bill Hudson. He does I Am Morbid. He's done Trans Siberian Orchestra in the past. He's with Doro, Northtail. Have you ever heard
Yeah,
of?
we've definitely ran into him and definitely know Bill. And it's crazy like going back to the whole Sabotage TSO thing, um, Bill was actually playing with Circle to Circle way back in like 2008, and Mind Maze wasn't a thing yet, but Jeff and my previous band before Mind Maze, Necromance, we actually did a show in Allentown opening for John Oliva's Pain and Circle to Circle, which was like a huge deal for us because we were such big Sabotage fans. But yeah, he was playing with them at the time, so that was when we originally met him. But I mean, since then he's been in so many different bands that we've definitely run into him again at Prague Power and other places. So
Have you always been a Sabotage fan? Because I know myself, I've been a Sabotage fan for a long time, and I'm guessing I can't speak for everyone who is a fan, but I can definitely say I think everyone would love to see a Sabotage reunion, if that's even possible anymore. Have you always been a big fan of them?
yes. I mean, the I've been like I got into Sabotage when like I was in high school, which that's going back like 18 years ago probably is nearing on the time that we got into Sabotage. And so we kind of just missed basically the end of Sabotage existing back then. So obviously them reuniting would be an amazing thing, and I think everybody everywhere wishes, like, I wish they could just kind of do one more tour, even if it's just like sort of a farewell thing. But I think that would be great because there's so many younger people that just never got a chance to see them, um and are huge fans. And Sabotage was just such a unique band for me because I just, at the time that I heard them, I honestly really got into the band from like the 90s era stuff, like with Zach Stevens singing and like the concept albums from that period time, like Dead Winter Dead and Wake of Magellan. Like that stuff really grabbed me because it was kind of like theatrical in nature, which TSO is like that as well. And
Mhm.
I just hadn't heard like anything like that. I'm like, this is so cool. Like it kind of appeals to like a musical theater side of me, but it's also metal. And like, yeah, I just thought it was so unique. But I mean, and I haven't really heard other bands other than like side projects of the people that were in Sabotage that kind of really hit hit the same spot as far as like how they sound. So, I mean, yes, I would probably, that's one of those few tours that's like a bucket list thing that I've never seen. At this point, my list of, bucket list artists that I haven't seen has gotten pretty short, but like they're definitely like number one.
It's awesome, and I have friends who are and people who are texting me questions. I guess next time I will put out the do you have any questions for this artist sooner so that people have more time to ask questions that they want answered. You said you were part of Necromancy. That's awesome. I actually really enjoy that music. What would you say is different or the same between your current band Mind Maze and Necromance?
Well, I mean, Necromance was like our first band, and I think like sonically and, from a musical standpoint, we were trying to go for a similar sound. It's just we were teenagers that had no idea what we were doing, and we just kind of wanted to play music with our friends. And I mean, it obviously started out as a like us just getting together with people in our garage and playing Iron Maiden covers because, you know, that's what you do when you're a teenager and you're trying to play music. Um, so it started out like that, and we kind of tried to write songs that were in that style, like of Iron Maiden, Queensryche, those kinds of bands. But like it was such a immature, like not developed sound. Our like Necromance, I think, was a lot more on the side of just like traditional heavy metal. We didn't really get much into the like progressive or honestly even power metal yet because when we started doing Necromance, we like barely even knew what power metal was. So while we were doing that band, I think we really kind of discovered all the rest of the pieces of, different styles of metal that I think make up what our sound is today. It's just that it was such a basic kind of entry idea back then.
That's awesome. And now I will ask a question that someone is texting me right now. Um, what do you like to do in your spare time?
Well, I mean, my most of my time recently has been taken up by photography. I've actually been kind of really trying to like start a photography business as like my sort of aside from music gig. Um and that kind of really I've always been into photography. Like I always really like to do photography at concerts. That was how it started. But when COVID happened, I kind of was left with a lot of time to like I was still working throughout the whole thing, but there weren't concerts and that you couldn't really go anywhere. So
Yeah.
I just started going outside and like doing nature photography and just taking walks, and I got really into taking like bird pictures and stuff like that. And it's kind of developed from there over the last like couple of years. I've gotten like really, really into it. Um, and so, yeah, I've been kind of on the side trying to start a photography business. Ironically or not ironically, my photography name is Strange Wings Photography, obviously named after the Sabotage song Strange Wings. So, that's like my photography thing, which that's been most of my time outside of like music, and my full-time job is just doing photography.
I actually took photography when I was in Italy studying abroad in the fall. And I always say, I'm always looking for digital media internships. So if anyone out there in the digital media realm or yourself need help with anything, I'm in, because my advisor has always told me, look, even if it's not called an internship, it can still count.
Yeah, I mean, experience is experience, and I mean, I graduated from like LTRI-C in 2021 with I got my associates in graphic design, so that's kind of been my other thing. I have to make a living, unfortunately. So far that hasn't been my like main job, but that's kind of what I've been trying to do aside from music, obviously.
What made you first fall in love with photography?
I mean, I always enjoyed the fact that like with photography you can kind of really capture just a moment as it happens, and like an emotion sort of like when it comes to photography for people. Um I always preferred like I mean, I do some kind of like photo shoot, staged modeling kind of things, but for the most part I just like to capture like natural moments as they happen, because it's always just been interesting for me to try to see something and like capture that exact feeling of the moment. That's what I think drew me to it.
I think it's so interesting. I myself am a digital media major, so I think it's so cool that both music and photography, if you combine them together, they really can capture a moment in time and really speak to emotion and things as they happen. And I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my thing is running short on time as it's reminding me my Zoom is only the basic one. So I'm going to wrap up here. First of all, Sarah, thank you so much for being on today. A special shout out to our friend Dustin, who actually told me about Sarah and her band Mindways, which actually got me to be a fan of Mindways in the first place. So thank you, Dustin, for recommending Sarah to the podcast today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to me today.
Of course, it was awesome to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And before we wrap up last minute, um, what can fans look forward to with Mind Maze coming into the future now?
Well, like I said, we are definitely in the process of working on our fourth full-length album that should be out in 2024. So we're gonna be putting out a new album next year, and then we'll probably be doing some shows in conjunction with it too. I think we will be back at Music Fest this year, so there's that to look forward to, and there might be a few other, shows sprinkled in there. But definitely, I think the biggest thing is new album. And yeah, we're excited about that as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and hopefully some of us from Bearcast Media can come and catch you, hopefully sometime in Cincinnati.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. It was so good talking to you today.
Thank you.
All right, that about wraps up the podcast for today. Thank you so much for listening. And this interview will probably be out by probably either the end of this week or going into the very start of next week. Thank you so much, Music Evolution Revolution fans, and I will see you next time.